Hi, Inga Company here with Joe and Zoe. Today we're going to talk to you about coaching people that are experiencing anxiety. And the reason we're talking about that today is because anxiety is something that we can all experience as human beings. So it's a normal emotion. It's neither good nor bad. Just thinking makes it so. And also, we have been requested to talk about this topic by the members of our free coaching crowd group on Facebook, which is where people that are interested in developing themselves and others come and share resources and ideas with us. And we share these demos along with other things. So, Zoe, we were talking just before we came online about how to coach anxiety. What are the thoughts about this that are front of mind for you?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I start with is just really unpacking what that anxiety is. So, as you said, anxiety is a normal emotion. So often it comes up in coaching because it may have peaked, so we can all feel anxious about certain events, but there may be other things that pique our anxiety and we can lose perspective on everything that's going on. So really breaking it down. So I feel really anxious, like, okay, you know, let's talk about what are all the things that are causing that anxiety. So I think really breaking it down to try and find what is generally the one thing that's causing the most anxiety, because everything else, then it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back, isn't it? Like if you've got a big thing, everything else can suddenly feel quite insurmountable as well. So unpacking it, I think, is a helpful place to
Yeah,
start.
because you can have clients will come and say, I'm an anxious person.
Hmm.
And as a coach, that doesn't fit with my model of the world. So I don't see people as anxious people. I see that people have the ability to experience anxiety. So having a discussion around that, and as you say, identifying, do you feel anxious brushing your teeth? Do you feel anxious um, making your dinner, giving someone a hug? And they might say, no, no, yes. Okay, so you don't feel anxious all the time. No. Okay, great. So, and breaking it down and also maybe measuring the anxiety. So, when they identify something that triggers anxiety, right now on a scale of 0 to 10, how anxious do you feel? Okay, in the situation that you're talking about, how anxious do you feel about that? And maybe helping them to monitor it over time because they'll need to be able to notice, or it's helpful to notice when they're making progress.
Hmm. And
And
of
we were talking
course,
about how,
I was going to say, and of course, when you are anxious, you kind of feel like it's all bad, so you won't, if you've been monitoring it, you'll be able to look back and notice when you haven't felt anxious. But if you're in an anxious phase, obviously you're going to be more clouded about your general experience.
and
Yeah.
anxiety is a future focused emotion. So it's about having a fear of something that hasn't yet occurred. So one of the things that you can do with a client, if it is appropriate, is to actually do some sort of visualization exercise, taking them out to after the event has been completed, thinking about what would need to happen in order for that to be successfully achieved, or if it doesn't, taking them out beyond it, looking back on it. There's lots of different things that you can do, and Zoe and I are both trained in timeline therapy, and so there are lots of tools and things that we use to work with clients that have high levels of anxiety over a sustained period.
But even on a practical level, without that training, I think when you do that sort of work, what you start to focus in on are strengths and talents. When you're highly anxious, you can disregard, some of the things that you have and the tools that you have available to help you be more resilient. And so, just drawing attention to the fact that you have the ability to speak up for yourself. You have the ability to control certain things that are going on in your environment. You have the ability to, whether it's be creative or solve problems, whatever those strengths and talents are, sometimes drawing your clients' attention to them by doing some strength work can really help just to boost confidence and resilience so that when they're faced with a situation that's making them anxious, they can trust in some of those tools because they're higher up in their awareness.
Yeah, and the events, like I suppose my view is events don't make us anxious. anxiety is a response that we can have to a situation. And so often with clients, like one of my clients recently said, yeah, now we've done this work together, I think about emotions as being data points. They're signals. So what is it a signal for? So actually helping a client to work out, when I experience anxiety, what is that telling me that I need to do in order to help myself? And for some people, it will be to rest. For some people, like you say, it'll be to seek help or to speak up, or maybe it's to do some writing, like to get the anxiety out of the head. Because the thing with anxiety is it really does tend to take you deep inside your head and make you almost inaccessible to others, or almost like being in a realm.
Yeah.
So focusing on what you can control can be really helpful, and also just reflecting and doing some work with your coach around, what is this a signal for? Because that can give real confidence. And it's almost like, how do we help our clients befriend the full range of emotions that they're able to experience, and instead think, oh, hello anxiety, see, you've come to help me. Or sometimes actually being able to develop that relationship where they can let that anxiety, they can almost touch it, but it floats on by. They've taken the learning that they need, and they can move forward.
I think
it's the resistance that creates the problem.
Yeah, that piece that you said about learning, I think, is really important, because as you said, what's the signal? There's also like, what's the learning in this? So you can also look back on previous events where you felt anxiety and have a look at, well, what was there to learn from that event? So yes, I can identify being anxious before, because the learning is you got through it. It was okay. You probably learned some new things and some new skills. So focusing on learning through the lens of emotion can be can be really helpful.
And who am I outside of my anxiety? Who am I without it?
And who am I with it? Because that's equally valuable.
Yeah. So, and of course there's work that you can do around beliefs, and there's all sorts of other things that you can draw on. I think with anxiety, it can be a strong emotion. Sometimes it's about just being there with the client and being able to sit there in that space and help to give them new perspectives on it, as well as new approaches.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we were saying at the start. Like, anxiety is a normal emotion. I've just got off with a client, and we were talking about anxiety, and there was an element of wanting to get rid of it, like it needs to go. And it's like, well, some anxiety is completely understandable in the situation that you're in, and so you can lean into it and listen to it and hear what there is to learn from it, as we've kind of detailed, and be patient, but knowing that it will pass. The anxiety will pass. It's not going to be there forever. But I think that's a general theme around negative emotion, is many of us are desperate to get rid of them. Sometimes it's about recognizing
things. Like that. There's that Disney film. Is it called Inside Out? Which is about emotions, and I think there's a scene in the film where the emotion fear, which is obviously anxiety, sort of belongs in that field. It's all about what that fear enabled. So I think in the end, it enabled connection, because when people see that people are frightened, they tend to go towards them to help to reassure them. So there is a positive outcome. How can you get that same response by engaging in a different emotion? Like if you can help your client to a position where they feel that they can choose their emotions, that's another approach.
And I guess what we're starting to explore there is positive intent. Like, what is the positive intent of anxiety? And it's probably to keep you safe. So then you can start to focus on what are the things that you can do that will enable you to experience safety over anxiety. And that might be deepening some of your relationships, or asking for help and support. You can turn it away from focusing on the emotion to back into a place of control.
So essentially, like with all things as a coach, it's not something that we approach as something that needs to be fixed. Rather, we approach it with curiosity. And of course, you're also going to be scanning, the conversation and the signals and everything that you're picking up. And it may be appropriate with some clients to explore whether they need additional support outside of the coaching relationship, because we know that anxiety can sometimes need additional help beyond the coaching relationship. And that's your role as a coach.
Yeah.
sometimes is to refer on.
And I think for me, the differentiating factor there is there's systemic anxiety. You know, somebody that experiences chronic anxiety and panic attacks, you know, consistently throughout their day to day life that debilitates them in some way. The anxiety I think we're talking about here, I've got this big meeting coming up, I'm feeling really anxious, or lots going on in your life and you're just having a period of time where you're more anxious than usual. Like that all sounds coaching appropriate, and your client will tell you if it's appropriate for coaching. Obviously, with more of the systemic anxiety, some of that may be appropriate for coaching, some of that may be more suited to therapy. And I think for me, it's about working in partnership with your client to decide, well, what's useful and appropriate for this space, and I know my level of competence, and they know their level of need. And the same with all coaches. Like, we just have to judge what is good to work with. But I do think that in when you take on your role of the coach, emotions is going to be part of the work that you do. Not all negative emotions are bad, and not all negative emotions need to be referred. And
Yes,
it's
so we're talking beforehand about how you may be a confident, competent coach when you work with people, clients that are experiencing anxiety, and they're sharing their stories, or that they're holding the anxiety in the coaching session. You might start to notice that you yourself begin to feel anxious about coaching this client or coaching in generally, and maybe are absorbing some of that emotion that is, you know, in the space between you. And it's important to be able to monitor that and notice it and take it to supervision and explore it. Is it yours, or is it your client's, and what do you want to do with that? So that's also something to watch out for when you're
yeah.
coaching with these topics.
So a
Hope
few
that's useful.
Yeah, a few kind of different thoughts, approaches, and reflections from our position here. And yeah, I hope you've got something from that. If you haven't come to visit us in the coaching crowd recently, please do. You can see the address on the video. That's on Facebook, and the group called the Coaching Crowd. So pop along and say hello.
Or come and visit our website, which is www.igcompany.co.uk, where you can read about training to be a coach with us, or the other services we provide in terms of coaching. See you soon.
Take care.